Howdy, y'all, and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge, and I'm already dropping things. I just lost my marker. And I'm here to teach you inner work that accelerates your power to change the world. We talk about all the stuff that goes on inside, how to heal those parts, how to recognize those parts. What is it really all about? And that's kind of what we're going at today in terms of breakdown to breakthrough. Now, you may be familiar with this term. Have you heard that term? Well, this is your breakdown to breakthrough, or I'm having a breakdown before the breakthrough, or breakdown, breakthrough. So if you haven't heard that, if you have heard that term, you probably have some idea of what I'm talking about. If you haven't, let me just try to explain, define it, and I'll do my very best. So it's this idea that right before we're about to have a big breakthrough, so a breakthrough in terms of we're about to, go to a higher level in our lives, we're about to have a big shift, a big positive shift, maybe something we've really been wanting, a breakthrough of kind of an epiphany, a big, acceleration of things, a realization of a hope or a dream, something like that would be a breakthrough, let's say, like we've really broken through to the next level, to a new experience or a new identity. Oftentimes what comes before that is a breakdown. So what kinds of breakdowns? Obviously there's like the car type of breakdown, but in this case, I'm really talking more about an emotional breakdown. I mean, you could say a mental breakdown, and yes, that could be the case, but mental breakdown, I think, kind of implies something almost like mental illnessy type. I don't necessarily want to imply that, but a breakdown is in like a meltdown. And that's kind of what I mean when I talk about breakdown. So name of breakdown mean that, because that's usually how they happen for me, is that I'll have a massive emotional meltdown and I'll cry and I'll freak out. And I'll just, and it will feel like the whole world's coming apart, and I'll feel like, all of my dreams are just going to crash and fail, and I'm going to fail. And it's just this horrible sort of catastrophizing. It's like this emotionally catastrophizing place. So that's how breakdowns tend to show up for me. They might show up differently for you. For some people, it might be that they have some kind of physical ailment or something that happens. Maybe it's like nothing's going right in their lives, or things sort of are falling apart, and it looks like everything's breaking down. But really, this can be an indication that you're about to break through. Not always. I don't want people to try to convince themselves that if everything in their life is terrible, then, well, it's just their breakdown to breakthrough. It could actually be that you do need to make some changes in your life in order for things to work better. But really what I'm saying is, like, right as you're on the precipice, right as you're about to do that big thing, maybe it's, okay, I'll give you my personal example. As always, this has come up for me this week, right as I'm about to launch my podcast, my first podcast, in which I'm going to be sharing actual sessions of the drawing out process. What did I have yesterday? And I think the day before, a meltdown. Of course I did. I had an emotional meltdown. And luckily I am aware enough to be able to recognize like when it's happening or when something's coming up that I need help with. And so luckily in this case, I was able to turn to my husband, who was working from home yesterday, it's the night before. I was working from home. And I just said, can I just talk about, what's going on with me? I can feel that I have some thoughts that I need to give voice to them. I'd already written them down. I'd already sort of tried talking aloud, but I really needed someone else to be a witness and to just let me vent. And he's really wonderful about that, as long as I give him a heads up and say, this is what I need to do. And so I said to him, I take that back. It was evening, he got home, and I told him immediately, I said, just so you know, sweetie, if it's okay, I'm gonna need to vent for a minute. Well, sure enough, I thought it was just gonna be me just sort of blah, 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 some of my fears around the podcast. It turned into me like sobbing and crying and, giving voice to all this really deep emotional stuff that didn't even necessarily have to do with the podcast. It wasn't specifically about the thing it was about to launch, but it was all these other like childhood fears and, wounds and stuff like that that were coming up, because launching the podcast, in my case, like symbolized a lot of that. So for example, one of them, and I may have shared this before, but one of them was, no one cares about what I care about. So it's a belief that I've carried And it's that no one will care about my podcast, and I really care about it, but no one's going to care about it. Now, I recognize this as having come up originally too when I launched the free community, the changelight.world community. The same thing came up. It was like, no one's going to care. No one cares about what I care about. I'm like, what? And my husband knows me well enough to know that this is just my process, and he can just sit and listen and be supportive and rub my back. And, he doesn't have to fix it for me. I've explained that to him before. So he's really good about doing that. And just side note, you've got someone like that in your life. Bravo, bravo, you. And if you don't, find someone like that, because they're really great. But sometimes you got to set the parameters and say, I just need to vent. I just need to let loose, and you don't need to fix this. So that's how I let my husband off the hook too. You don't have to fix this. I just need to feel it. So there I was, and no one cares about what I care about. And I'm crying and sobbing, and he's sitting and he's listening very patiently as I'm going through this for probably about an hour. But the point is that was a breakdown right before I'm about to, in my situation, have a breakthrough, which is to actually share my work with the world for the first time publicly. That's a big deal, a huge deal to me, because I've kept my work really close to the chest. I've only shared it with my clients, or if there's been the occasional workshop, I've been able to have long enough time to actually take someone through the process. So not a lot of people have actually seen the work. They've heard about my work, but to see it, to hear it, to experience it is a very unique thing. And so this is like me going, okay, here's my baby that I've been holding inside me or with close to me for years and years and years. And now I have to be like, okay, here it is. So imagine that, all the fears that come up from that, and all the old beliefs, and all the, sadness or the anger or the whatever, or fear of criticism, fear of failure, fear of success. That's a big one too. Fear of disappointment is a really big one. So that's what came up for me. Now, there's an example of a breakdown before a breakthrough. And I'm hoping, obviously, I don't know yet if my podcast will prove to be a breakthrough for me in terms of what I hope it will achieve for me and for my work and for the world. But for me, it's a breakthrough in that I'm finally sharing it. But the point is that before that can happen, in my case, there are emotional layers I have to release that are going to come up. And so why does that happen right as we're about to have a breakthrough? Well, I came up with a few different reasons. For one thing, obviously, fears. Fears arise anytime we're about to make a big change, or we're about to share something about ourselves, or we're about to, achieve something or try to achieve something, or and it could be anything in our lives. Maybe it's something with relationships. It could be with our job, with our work. It could be with, anything that we're wanting, that we're about to have a big breakthrough on. We can have a breakdown. Fears will arise, of course, because especially if it means the realization of a desire or a dream, then big fat fears can show up, because there's always the fear of disappointment. There's always the fear that it's not going to come true. There's always the fear of all the crap that can happen between here and there of actually achieving it. Fears will come up. And also the reason why too, it's not just fears because, that could actually happen. So of course you're afraid that could happen, but it's also parts of us that are scared for us, and they're trying to protect us from those feelings, from those disappointments, from those failures, from that criticism, from that success, they're trying to stop us from shining our light because of we might get the blowback or the criticism or the shaming or whatever. And so it's fears that come from parts of us as well that are trying to protect us. So sometimes, and this hasn't happened yet so far in my process with the I'll just say in this last week, but a lot of times I'll end up having to draw out parts of me that are like, I don't think that's going to work, or that are trying to tell me that I'm not good enough, or that are trying to dissuade me from, really, really going for it, really doing it. So they're just trying to protect us whatever way they know. They want to keep us in a safe zone that's familiar for us. That's one of the things, and I think it was my friend Matt Menino, years ago, I saw him give a talk, and he actually talks about it in terms of the nervous system. And then our nervous system's job is to keep us safe And that I think he was the one who said that also that the nervous system is about familiarity. It likes things that are familiar, known quantities, situations that it's familiar with, that it understands, it knows how to deal with it. However, when we're stepping into a space that's unfamiliar or unknown, that's maybe bigger than what we're used to, stepping onto a bigger stage, literally and figuratively, those parts of us, whether you want to see it as X powers, which is what I call them, or even just the nervous system goes, I freak out, right? So maybe we have to shut down. Maybe we go into a minor depression. Maybe we, get especially irritated or angry. Maybe we have meltdowns like I do. There are all kinds of ways that these breakdowns can show up. Or sometimes people will say that this will happen too, where we manifest things not going our way. So like an actual car breaking down. It's like things kind of keep getting in the way to try to stop us. And sometimes that can be part of it too, that we end up manifesting it. Or, oh, we're just so busy at work. And so the work, we just get so focused on work that it becomes a distraction from actually taking that step or having that breakthrough. So those can be kind of different forms of breakdowns, if you will. It all, I think, depends on you and sort of what I guess your inner system has figured out as a way to stop you. Because again, it's trying to protect you, it's scared for you, it doesn't like the unknown. So fears arising. Why is that? Also, why is that? It's not just, because just the thought of it, but actually, if it's actually becoming a reality, that thing, that it's like, speaking of our nervous system, it's like, and this is for me too, it's like it starts to sink in. And it's like, whoa, this is becoming real. So for me with the podcast, I've been working on this for months. And I did internet radio years ago. So this isn't a first time for me. It's like my first rodeo, if you will. There are new elements to it. It's very different. The internet radio I did back in 2007, 8, compared to, 2023. And I'm doing an actual podcast. Podcast didn't exist back then. But the point being that it's one thing to kind of go, oh, it's an idea and I'm creating this thing and isn't it cool? And, and in my mind, it's like, I get really idea for it. Oh, I could do this, I could do that, I could do that. But as it starts to come together and you reach that deadline, you're getting closer to that deadline, it's becoming real. And so when it becomes real and starts to sink in, it's almost like you can imagine the reality sinks in. And what does it do? It also bumps into those parts that are like, whoa, I don't know, this is too much. This was kind of nice while you were just thinking about it, honey, but this is really becoming real. And so that's also why those parts can get triggered, because it's starting to sink in, it's starting to get real. It's like they say, this shit's about to get real. Well, there are going to be parts of you that are suddenly going to rear their heads. They're going to rise up. Now what? They might not have done it for months before, but they're doing it now because all of a sudden it's like, oh no, she's serious. It's like, oh God, oh shit, oh my language, but oh, she's serious. Yeah. So those parts can rise up. And then also though, I do believe that there is a higher purpose for these breakdowns. And that is that it's preparation for that expansion. So if you want to move into a bigger stage in your life, for example, or if you are making a big, massive change, or you have certain, projects you're working on with hopes for those things, in order to fulfill that purpose, that usually means you're going to be playing a bigger role. And that means you're going to be expanding emotionally, mentally, energetically, to be able to play that role, to be able to fulfill that purpose, to serve that. So what can happen is that there are parts that are calling you to that higher calling and that bigger role and that expansion. But what happens is then it means that those parts that are not in alignment or in vibration or not as light filled at the moment as that expansion, that's also what triggers. And so those parts need to come up to come out. Those fears need to come up to come out, or else if they stay there, they will sabotage you. And so think of a breakdown. This is what I really want to leave you with, a positive note of think of a breakdown as preparation. You're being prepared. You're being clear. You're being healed. You're being opened. You're being released. so that you can step onto this bigger stage, so that you can shine a brighter light, so that you can make a bigger difference, so that you can fulfill that role and be that presence you need to be in order to fulfill that mission, that person, that purpose, do that project, be on that stage, or in my case, do this podcast and really share my work in a really big way with the world, but do it in a way so that my own fears don't sabotage me as much, because I've been able to see them and heal them and release them. All right. So I hope this always has been helpful. Please do check out changelight.world. Take the course, go for it. It's free. The community is free, and stay tuned, because I will be releasing my podcast soon, and it's going to be actual sessions of the drawing out process. Really big, exciting, major stuff. I'm excited and I'm scared and I'm excited and I'm working through my own fears on this. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful. Take care. I'll see you later. See you next week.